Welcome back to another day of Bible study. My name's Kevin. I have the privilege of being lead clergy here at Christ Table. If you'd like to know more about Christ Table, all you need to do is visit the URL right there, www.christstable.today. Sign up for our email list there so that you will know everything that's happening around Christ Table. If you'd like more information about this study in particular, I know that we're fairly far into it, but you can start back at the very beginning or join us here for the last few days. You can find out more information right there at go.christstable.today/divinecomedy. You can get a printed copy of study curriculum there or a free copy there. Free copy, easy to download. Just click the link. If you'd like a printed copy along with some other spiritual formation resources, then you can get that by clicking on the button there that says get the box. One other thing I want to make sure that you know about, if you are navigating your spiritual journey, wondering whether or not you even want to be on a spiritual journey right now, if you're trying to reclaim your faith, check out this book, drkevinyoung.com. It'd be a great resource for you or for other people as you navigate all of those questions. So we are navigating in this study Jesus and his wit, wisdom, humor, sarcasm, and sometimes kind of awkward statements that are very pointed that cause a very uncomfortable chuckle. And Jesus was fairly funny and would oftentimes say things that would create awkward tension. In order to teach lessons or in order to bring a very specific point into the forefront of those people who were listening or those people who perhaps more rightly needed to make some sort of an ethical or moral change in their life. We come on one of those today as we tackle on day 27, a Sabbath Untying. We're going to jump into Luke chapter 13, verses 10 through 17 for a bit of a longer passage than we normally tackle here in this Bible study. But I think you'll see why, and it's very important, and it's going to make a point that Jesus has made many other times before, but it seems as though perhaps people just aren't getting it. So let's just go ahead and dive in. Luke chapter 13, one Sabbath. Sabbath is the holy day, a day of rest, a day of worship. There were very specific laws and guidelines for how to practice Sabbath and the rhythm of Sabbath, which started on Friday evening at sunset and went all the way until Saturday evening at sunset. One Sabbath, as Jesus was teaching in a synagogue, he saw a woman who had been crippled by an evil spirit. She had been bent double for 18 years and was unable to stand up straight. I just want to hit pause for just a moment and just think about that. I want you to, as you're reading this, allow that situation to kind of sink in. Let it hit you. What if it was your spouse? What if it was your child? What if it was you who had been bent double for 18 years? Unable to stand up straight. Imagine what life would be like. Imagine walking, sleeping, simple things such as writing, using the restroom, showering, preparing food, having a simple conversation with somebody that you can't stand up straight. So imagine just a moment for that. And 18 years. Allow that compassion, that sadness to wash over you. When Jesus saw her, he called her over and he said what we would hope Jesus would say in this situation, right? Dear woman, you're healed of your sickness. Then he touched her and instantly she could stand straight. And I'm guessing this is probably an understatement. How she praised God. Imagine what your response would be in that moment. But the leader, remember, Jesus is teaching in a house of worship, a synagogue that day. The leader in charge of the synagogue was indignant. Not perhaps the response that you might expect for somebody who you had any compassion whatsoever upon, was indignant that Jesus had healed her on this specific day. Any of the other 6 days would have been fine, but on this specific day, indignant. There are 6 other days of the week for working, he says, not to Jesus, but to the crowd. 6 other days for working. Come on those days to be healed, he says. Don't come on the Sabbath. So what we have here now is we have a crisis of context here, in that the question is, what is right, what is wrong, what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, what happens whenever the rules come in conflict with human suffering. Jesus, as we would also want him to do in addition to the healing, replies, you blankety, he doesn't say blankety, hypocrites. I probably would have, but I'm not Jesus. Each of you works on the Sabbath day. Jesus doesn't say, which is fascinating, it's okay to work on the Sabbath, but he points out what their hypocrisy. He points out all of them work on the Sabbath. Didn't you untie your ox or donkey from a stall on the Sabbath and lead it out for water? Jesus is like, just this morning, you yourself did work. This dear woman, a daughter of Abraham, has been held in bondage by Satan for 18 years. 18 years. Isn't it right that she'd be released, even on the Sabbath, no matter what day it is? And this shamed Jesus' enemies, but all the people rejoiced at all the wonderful things that he did. It shamed them because it pointed out something that they did regularly in community that caused harm to other people. This idea here of loosing, they did not want Jesus loosing the religious restrictions, but Jesus was intent on loosing people from bondage. They saw, maybe perhaps rightfully so, the law, their rhythms, their practices, their constraints as being helpful, as being healthy, as being guardrails. But they held to them too tightly. And in so doing, it became a noose around the neck of people like this woman, whom Jesus is trying to loose from chains of literal bondage, in that her body is bound here in a way in which it can't function, and which is also seemingly unnecessary because Jesus heals her. The interesting thing is that they weren't even following their own precedent. And we, right now here in the United States of America have this real difficult kind of crisis and conversation that we're going through about precedent and how people are supposed to be handled and how people are not supposed to be handled. What is allowable in the treatment of others and what is not allowable in the treatment of others. And so much of the crisis right now is coming down to the precedent that is there, the law that is there, and how it is interpreted. And there are many who want to utilize the law in order to harm people for reasons that they feel are justifiable. And there are others who are saying there is no justifiable reason to bring harm to individuals, especially individuals in which the situation is gray. Jesus is essentially saying a similar thing here. There is no justifiable reason for creating harm unnecessarily or bringing harm unnecessarily or even maybe necessarily to other people. And there is rabbinic precedent about allowing life-preserving actions. This was a life-preserving action. So Jesus, even within the boundaries of the law and within the boundaries of precedent, was well inside of his ability and authority and the rhythms of rabbis. But here, in this specific situation with this specific lady, with this specific synagogue leader, there was no grace. There was no mercy. There was simply legalism and fundamentalism. Follow my rules, even if these rules come in contact with precedent, even if these rules come in contact with our religious tradition, even if these rules come in contact with the direct commands and intent of the heart of God. I'm sheriff here. I'm chief authority. What Jesus is pointing out through a humorous comparison of a donkey to a woman and how the donkey gets better treatment from this individual than the people in his own synagogue is a very uncomfortable and I would say ungodly inconsistency. And it's very easy for us to point at the Pharisees or the religious leaders or to point at this individual in the synagogue and say, yes, uncomfortable inconsistency, religious inconsistency, ungodly inconsistency, and not realize that we have the same issue in so many of our own areas in life. In fact, I think that opportunities like this, moments like this in the text, are an opportunity for us to delve deeply first into ourselves and say, how am I in violation of this? Where am I in violation of this? And before we maybe immediately jump to some other person in some other place in some other way that's inconsistent and perhaps in our minds wrong, that we instead first do introspection. This individual here, the leader of the synagogue, that was part of his issue as well there, right? That he did not first take a look at himself and his own inconsistencies before he began pointing out others, namely specifically here, God himself's inconsistencies. But we do that too, right? We actually call out other people who are doing it in a godly way, ignoring our own inconsistencies and our own problems. It's plank eye. It's that syndrome where we are trying to remove the smallest slight potential error or problem in somebody else and missing the entire beam. Sawdust in their eye, trying to pull it out, trying to point it out, when all the time we have this telephone pole, coming out of our eyes. Well, that's all the time that we have for today. We'll be back tomorrow. Make sure that if you've not already done so, that you go over to go.christstable.today/divinecomedy, download that study curriculum. There is more context available in that guide, as well as a few questions to help you reflect a little bit more deeply on today's study. It's been good to be with you today. Looking forward to being back with you tomorrow. And until